The trial of Lori Vallow Daybell.
Hello, welcome back. This is the second episode of a podcast with myself, Hugo, and Aimee. Aimee and I are journalists for KSL News Radio. We're covering the trial of Lori Vallow Daybell. Before we get into it, we're going to be talking about the opening arguments today and just some of the things that have started to come out as the trials got underway. There is a trigger warning, guys. We're going to be talking about some pretty dark stuff, images, that sort of thing. But first, Aimee, good to have you back. How are you?
Good to be here. Yeah.
Awesome.
Good to be back in Utah.
Yeah, well, you were up
back.
in Boise. So you're up in Boise. Take me into the opening statements of the first day.
Yeah, so the opening statements were, first of all, I just want to let you know, because the atmosphere being in that courtroom. So the last couple of days in the first week with jury selection, no one was actually allowed in the courtroom except for those that are there reporting for jury duty. And so the journalists and people from the public that were interested in this, the opening arguments were the first time that the courtroom was actually open, and you had to go through this whole process to get a seat and kind of this weird lottery system. And so the energy was really excited. People were there. I was in line. You had to wait in line too to get into the room.
Like a chicken
and
shop.
Yeah, it was a little odd. Never experienced that before. And I was in line and just talking to some of the women that were around me, a lot of women too, that were excited to be there. One woman said, "I'm here for Tylee." And I asked, "Oh, where are you from?" She said, "I'm just from here in Idaho and wanted to be here today to remember Tylee," and had heard about the case. And so every room or every seat in that room was full. There were 62 seats open and every single one was full with someone. And so everyone was kind of excited as she comes into the room. You see people, kind of like trying to get a look at
Everyone
her.
wants to see her, yeah.
And
absolutely.
And also the judge had kind of given orders. We knew, you couldn't have cell phones, you had to be quiet, there's no cameras in the room. And so some of the atmosphere there was really, people are excited to get a look at her.
Well, Aimee, one of the questions we asked Greg Scortis on the first episode last Friday was, how do you defend someone like Lori Vallow Daybell? And you were there to hear the opening arguments. So let's start with the defense. How'd they do it?
Yeah, I was a bit surprised. Her defense, Jim Thomas, started by saying that he was there because basically this is his job. He's a public defender, and
so he just defended
almost
himself first. He was like, "Hey, I'm not. This isn't me.
This isn't me. This is
paying my bills."
He also said that he's covered a lot of murder cases and that his office has received threats and bomb threats and things. So it kind of went into like this weird space where it was hard to follow. And this was right after the prosecution started opening arguments pretty strong. And, we said trigger warning. There were some photos there that were just, Lindsay Blake, who has started the prosecution opening statements, standing there showing photos of remains and pointing out that this is what this case is about. So it was a little weird to have that kind of dichotomy between here's someone showing bodies and then here's someone saying this is just my job and I'm just here to do my job.
I guess with a trial like this, with the amount of publicity it's received, that Netflix documentary and that sort of thing, it mustn't seem quite real until that moment where they suddenly show, oh yeah, by the way, these are the remains of the children that were killed involving this case.
Yeah, here's JJ in duct tape in a trash bag, in the ground. And so it doesn't seem quite real. And also at the same time, to see Vallow Daybell standing there in between, there's lots of breaks in court, and she would stand up and kind of seem like she's joking around with her attorneys and very smiley, very happy. During some of the opening statements, I saw her whispering and shaking her head, and she looked very upset. And we also saw that this week that she got even more upset.
Yeah. To those who don't know about that, I think it was it Tuesday? Yeah. Well, I know from the newsroom, we all rushed in from our meeting. We were having it outside in the nice Utah weather for once. And we all rushed inside because we thought, oh my goodness, they might be calling for a deal. Now, that wasn't the case. Their lawyers actually just asked if Lori was requesting that she didn't have to sit there in court. And I mean, for me, that raised a lot of questions. The first one was, like you said, apparently she's come across, sort of joking, not too upset, sort of not reacting. And I was wondering, I mean, is this just a play to sort of show the jury that, no, I'm affected?
Yeah, it's a real shift from day one to day two. And day two on Tuesday was a detective, Detective Hermosillo, who is in Idaho and was in charge of this case of finding these kids. And he spoke about really the discovery of the bodies of JJ and Tylee. And as you can imagine, you have it got really gruesome. And so we think maybe she knew that was coming because obviously her lawyers have seen this evidence before. They have to have all of the evidence, laid out before they can start this trial on both sides. And so maybe they were preparing her, maybe there was some discussion, and it is a weird shift though to go from laughing and smiling to all of a sudden, she's refusing to enter the courtroom and only entered the courtroom when the judge ordered her.
Aimee, what those photos that were shown, you've sort of said remains or in duct tape. Can you sort of walk me through a little bit, maybe in a bit more detail? Like, did you get an indication how decomposed or how long they'd been there?
Yeah, I'm not a, I've seen, like, we've all seen late night television, yeah. and that, but to see it and it's not a set, and it's not just someone, drawing a picture. These are real photographs of someone's skull, a partial skull for Tylee that's in the ground there. And then we learned in court that they discovered her DNA on a pickaxe and a shovel. And so the fact that her body was so broken up and kind of destroyed in whatever they did, and
it's violent.
It's violent. Yeah. It's very violent. And she was just a teenage girl. And that's really hard to digest. I don't blame anyone in that courtroom for having a hard time digesting that. I had a hard time digesting that and thinking about what it was, and just realizing this is someone that was, we've seen photos of them happy, smiling, some cute photos of both of them, right? And that's how we think of them. And so it's different, though. I think that people don't have a lot of that compassion for Lori because she is obviously facing the penalty.
Well,
she,
yeah,
possibly the penalty, and is up for murder and conspiracy to murder. And one thing that was also brought up in opening arguments was that she was using money. Both the kids had Social Security benefits that they were receiving, and the prosecutor, Blake, said multiple times she was using this money, and she was using it while they were dead. And so when you hear some of those things, you start to feel a little bit less bad that, it's hard for all of us to sit here and to look at this. But when there's evidence that shows that was happening and she's accused of these crimes, everyone has to kind of face Judgment Day.
I want to take you back to the opening arguments for the defense before going to the prosecution, because I know you sort of said that it sounds like from what you've said, no one's on her side. For a defense lawyer to come out and say, basically, don't put me in the same box, I'm not, that sort of thing.
Trying to separate himself.
Yeah. I mean, I would just take a plea if my defense lawyer did that. That sounds terrible. But out of interest, once he got past that, what was her defense? What did he say?
That's a good question. So he did say that she has an alibi, that she was in Hawaii during the murder of the alleged murder of Tammy Daybell, her death, which we also learned in court this week, opening arguments, that she died of asphyxiation. And
we'll touch on that in a moment.
That alibi, he also kind of like held it up and said, so she has an alibi, and read a couple lines from it. And it was almost like an aside. He just kind of mentioned it. But then he also kind of alluded to the fact that these jurors are going to have to decide this case based on the evidence shown and what evidence is not shown. Basically saying that there's not going to be enough evidence to tie her to the death of her children and to the death of Tammy. And so that very well could be the case, because the prosecution also did not draw that clear line to her. They alluded to it, there was some hints of it, but that line has not clearly been drawn to Lori.
I think that's what Greg was sort of saying.
Yeah, absolutely.
Greg Scortis, obviously our KSL legal analyst, was saying last week was the prosecution have to convince all the jurors. The defense just has to put doubt in one for it to be a mistrial or to move on. And so, yeah, that's really interesting. Now, you said as well, when we were talking earlier in the week, that the prosecution came out guns firing. They hit it for 6.
Yeah, they did. I think they were hoping for a little bit of a shock value in showing some photos. I think they were.
Do you think they got that?
Yeah, I do.
They've clearly got it from the journalists in the room.
Yeah.
The jury?
Yeah. There was a lot of typing. But I also think, the first lines from Lindsay Blake were money, power, sex. That's what this case is about. That was her first sentence.
The power bit.
Yeah, I think the power bit is a little bit more that she wanted everyone out of her way so that she could be with Chad. That's kind of what she was. That is what she said. She said that very clearly. And so they're going to have to make that case and really show the intent there on Lori's behalf, that she was intent on killing the people in her life and, at least conspiring. She does have an alibi for some of these times and locations as far as being in Hawaii, but it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
I find it really interesting that the defense, and I could be wrong here, but it doesn't sound like they even really touched on the mental health side of it.
No.
Because as we're hearing, we started hearing yesterday and we're hearing a little bit more today, they're interviewing, on the stand is Melanie Gibbs, Lori's ex-best friend, I suppose you'd call her.
Yeah, I don't think they're best friends.
I don't know if they've kept that bond tight. I don't know if they text.
Broke up a bit.
They don't text anymore,
no.
But and she's starting to talk about the deterioration of her of I guess the religious beliefs or what she called religious beliefs, like the zombie children. We're starting to hear those trigger words that I guess were used so much in the documentary and other reporting.
Yeah, that's really been, I think, what has made this case interesting for a lot of people too, and drawn a lot of people in. First, it was where are the kids, but then you start hearing about some of these beliefs that Lori had. And if you look at the indictment for the murder of these children, it mentions using her beliefs to justify it. And so that's where it really gets into some really tough ground, is because it's not just that she has some beliefs that, that her children are possessed, essentially. It's that she's using that as a justification to be okay with the fact that they're dead and gone and no one knows where they are. Yeah. And so that's really going to be kind of the crux of why they're getting into these beliefs, why they're asking Melanie Gibb, tell us about, they talked a little bit about the relationship
Lori and
between
JJ
them,
and how that changed.
Melanie yesterday talked a little bit about, she thought that JJ was a normal autistic kid. He was doing things that a 7-year-old, 6-year-old kid does. I don't know about you, but I got into a lot of trouble at 6 years old. I don't even want to know what you did. Let's not dive into that. But that's normal behavior for a 6-year-old. And she mentioned one case where Lori had said, oh, he's climbing on the fridge. He's climbing on the cabinets. He's doing these things. Isn't that so? Can't you see that he is obviously changed? He has become possessed in a way. And Melanie was confused and said that in court, that she was like, he seemed just like a
It's
kid.
also a tough one as well, because I know, like, I'm not obviously a parent, but you know, I know just from watching my parents, it must be tough for someone like Melanie to sort of, you don't want to comment on the parenting of someone else.
Yeah.
It's none of your business, sort of thing.
Yeah.
And there would be a lot of people, maybe even listening now, that if someone came up and said, "Oh, you're not doing this right," would be like, "Well, you know, what the heck do you know?"
Well, and it seems like Lori was asking for maybe some reassurance from her friend. They were close. You get the sense, really, from this testimony from Melanie, that they were very close. They texted a lot. They had what they called castings, where they would try to pray together and pray for one specific person, that they would be kind of, if they had an evil or dark spirit about them, that would be removed. And so that was brought up. So they were doing this together. And then you have the conversations where Melanie says she was almost looking for a justification on JJ's behavior.
Yeah, I have to wonder as well, and I'm sure we're going to hear more about this as the trial goes on. There's still so much to do, but when you hear about, you know, I don't know about you, but when I have done my reading on Lori Vallow Daybell and the events leading up, and some of the things she was saying, when I was doing some research into even some of the podcasts that she used to host with Chad Daybell and on the documentary, some of the things she was saying to me were massive red flags for mental health.
Yeah.
Calling your own children zombies, demon childs, that sort of thing, as openly as she was as well, to me is like, that sounds like someone. So I'm just surprised that hasn't been part of the defense, I guess. So I'm really interested to see when that comes up. And we already know her trial's been held a couple of times now because of, you know,
Some mental health concerns there, for sure. Yeah, it's going to be interesting, because she has been found competent, that she understands, and that really means she understands what she is facing, that she understands the charges, and she understands that she is basically liable for these deaths. And so, but that's why the trial is moving forward, was she was found competent to face this, and the fact that it was a big part of yesterday's questioning also has to deal with the spouses. You have, she's not yet faced any kind of charges in Arizona, but her former husband, her fourth husband, Charles, also died under suspicious circumstances, killed by Alex Cox, who was her brother, in a shooting that was self-defense, according to Alex Cox. And we are hearing today testimony from an investigator in Arizona who responded to that and was in charge of kind of breaking that whole thing down. But then you also were going to hear more testimony too about Tammy Daybell and her death. And
well, yeah, I actually just wanted to touch on that before we wrap this up, Aimee. I think one of the bigger bombshells this week was finding out that Tammy Daybell died of asphyxiation. Sorry if I haven't said that right. Asphyxiation.
You got to get it right. Yeah.
I got a bit of a lisp.
That was and it was just kind of thrown in there during
like
opening
that's
arguments. It was a bombshell, and it was just kind of mentioned, and the photo along with it. So this is Lindsay Blake telling jurors, you're going to find out that she died from asphyxiation. And then, oh, well, we all found out. and there's a photo of her up on this. There's kind of like a,
I'm surprised no one raised a hand. Excuse me, hang on.
I think we just did.
Might want to touch on that.
There's this PowerPoint with her face there, and you're just staring at this face of Tammy Daybell, bruised eyes. You know, you can clearly see that she is dead. She's got a white top on, and you can't hide from it.
Well,
and neither
yeah.
can Tammy, and neither can Lori as she's sitting there. It is big on this screen, and yeah, it was tough.
Well, I think as well, just for our listeners, because I had to Google this. Asphyxiation is not necessarily is very rarely a natural cause of death.
Yeah.
It's from lack of oxygen to the brain. Often it'll come from smothering with a pillow or strangling. Not saying that that's what happened, but, you know, I think I've only heard of a couple of cases in old folks' homes or retirement villages where someone's rolled over and not been able to roll back, and that's been determined as a natural asphyxiation or whatever it's called. So that the reason why that is a bombshell, because it shows that she is she was training for a marathon.
She's healthy.
She's healthy.
Yes.
She had no heart problems. Her medication wasn't causing her any issues that she was on. Like, there was no reason why Tammy Daybell could naturally die from asphyxiation.
Yeah. And so that will be a big thing that's brought up in this case. And remember, we still have Chad's case. We're going to be talking about these people for a while. And so it's the fact that came out. There was some, some question after her body had to be exhumed. Why is this happening? And then to get that bombshell first day in court is big.
It must be particularly, people who follow religious beliefs and stuff like that. When they do pass, it's a huge deal to ask the family to exhume a body. So
I think with anyone, I mean, you don't want to think of anyone
and to be dug up, and it must be a relief for the investigators to have found something they missed.
And maybe for the Daybell family as well. There were a lot of family members for the Vallow family. The Woodcocks were there. JJ's grandparents. You had a lot of family members in court, but you also have Tammy's kids, and so some kind of closure for them with these cases is. That's why we have a justice system, and that's why we go through this. It's painful. It's difficult to see these photos, but if you can have some, day, and you have this day in court so that these family members can feel like there's peace eventually for their kids and the victims that they've lost. That's part of the goal for sure.
Well, Aimee, there's a
lot.
I think we've wrapped up the key points of the first week. I'll be up in Idaho. I don't think next week, but maybe the week after. But we'll see you all back on
next Friday.
Thanks a lot for joining us.
Thank you.